Did you know that society holds us responsible for things that God wouldn't hold us responsible for? Did you know that we are often given responsibilities and requirements that it's impossible for us to fulfill? Well, today we're going to talk exactly about that subject, understanding ignorance through the eyes of God. What I love about God is that no matter what happens, He has a scale of judgment that is just phenomenal. And before we go into the word, I want to tell you a story that I was given by a young lady. This young lady had been dating a man for a while, and she very much loved this man, and he very much loved her. And something had happened that caused them to go their separate ways, but they were starting to come back together. And they had this one night where things got hot and heavy, but nothing happened. And so as she was telling me the story, she said, I was driving home to get ready for work the next day. And I was praising the Lord for everything that had happened the night before. Well, God stepped in and dropped in her spirit that what she had done was wrong. Although she didn't go the whole way, where she went in her mind and her heart, where the both of them went, was something that was not pleasing to God. In that instant, she apologized. And when the two of them finally got married, that was the first night they consummated their relationship. You see, God specifically came to her and said that behavior was incorrect. He wasn't going to hold her responsible as long as she didn't know. Let's be honest. In our world, what happens? You go to a bar, you meet someone, and you go to bed, and you each give yourself the most valuable part of yourself just because. Oh, it was fun. Never thinking of the long-term ramifications and what that does, the reputation that it leaves you with, all of this. And if you think their reputations don't exist today, they still do. Yes, they do. When we're ignorant, God looks at the situation a little different. He doesn't always drop it into our spirit that we did something wrong. Sometimes he sends someone to tell us we did something wrong. And if you want an example of that, go to 2 Samuel chapter 12, when Nathan goes to visit David and runs the scenario in a parable by him of what happened between he and Bathsheba. David said, "The man needs to die." Nathan said, "You won't die, but understand that these will be the repercussions of that choice." Ignorance is an excuse until you know. What you don't know, what you don't understand, when people give you bits and pieces of information, God doesn't hold you responsible for that. Oh, but society does. Oh, well, you should have known. What were you doing? And it's always funny because I want you to understand that we live in a world today that is so filled with Pharisees and Sadducees. It's unbelievable. People who would never ever go out and do something new and exciting are extremely critical of those who do. And they sit back and they're happy to accuse you of, oh, you did. You know what? If you need an example, look at the IRS, the good old Internal Revenue Service. Those guys will go through taxes and swear up and down, you did this intentionally, you did that intentionally. There are so many situations where people end up in harm's way for something that they were unaware of. And that's what happens. It's very frustrating, but it's the reality of the world that we live in. My favorite thing is recently, and I want to bring this to your attention, I've been seeing all these coaches who are like, you have the exact life that you want. That is an untrue statement. That is 100% false. You have the life that no one has taught you how to overcome. Now, once they teach you how to overcome it and you still live in that life, now that's on you because you only get one shot. Once you are educated, it is your job to take that information and move with it to the next level. I've been out in these small towns for a long time now, what feels like an eternity. I think it's only been a few years, but it does feel like an eternity. And what is fascinating to me is that of all the things in the world going on, they fixate on the most ridiculous things. The length of your grass. When has grass been a life altering issue? Oh, but in a small town, and we're talking about, 3,000 people and less. Oh my God, it's in the newspaper. You got a speeding ticket. It's in the newspaper. I mean, who does that? But what it does is it creates an area of closed-mindedness, of people who are unwilling and afraid to move. They won't take chances. They won't move forward. And what it does is it keeps them complacent. It keeps the haves with the have and the nots with the not. You understand what I'm saying? You see, when we live in ignorance, there is a cost associated with that ignorance. The reason the Bible tells us to study, to show thyself approved, is because it's through that study that we get to come out of ignorance. It's through watching videos of people who actually have been through the situations and can give you the instructions on how to get out of it. That's what God has set us up to do. You see, when you begin to understand the interdependence of man, that we need one another, right? To get to where we're going, you stop trying to buck the system and you start trying to find the people that you can work with. Because the reality is, I hate to put it to you, not everybody is for you. There are some people who are going to sit out there and they want to do what they do. They want to talk what they talk. They want to live that mess and they want to live in their lie. And those people, you have to let them live in that lie. They're going to do what they do. They're going to say what they say. They're going to be who they're going to be. You just let them be. Period. End of subject. You can't fix things that are beyond repair. You can't shatter a glass and think it's ever going to look the same again, even if you find all the pieces. When you don't understand something, your job is to go and find that information. And the sad thing is that when you're a milk drinker, it's really easy to look at this thing about God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and to say, oh, God is a masochist. Like he is deliberately out trying to cause people problems. So let's fix another area of ignorance for you, shall we? God is always for you. So one of my biggest pet peeves with religion is this. God could have stopped it. You know what? Stop saying that. It's a cop-out. Stop saying that. So let's talk about the truth of the matter. You live in a fallen world where people steal, they lie, they hurt you, they go out of their way to take what you have. They do everything they can to cause you pain. There's a whole group of people out there who get their jollies off of causing people pain. That's a fact. It doesn't change. It doesn't make things any less true. It's who they are. And because you live on this world, because you live in this place, you're going to experience that. I want to tell you a story about a client of mine who owns a big business. And recently he found out that one of his employees was stealing from him. Let me tell you the real big problem with that. He said, I don't really understand why God let that happen, but I'm really glad that he showed me. First off, God didn't let that happen. Where God stepped in was at the tipping point when if it had gone any further, you would have been bankrupt. You would have had nothing to your name. And he said, you might want to look at this. Now, here's the thing I want you to understand about this. We get to the place where we think people are trustworthy and we don't bother to check and see what they're doing. That's laziness. That's not allowing ourselves to keep an eye on what's going on. We become comfortable. We don't want to deal with things. You see, there are not a lot of people who hold themselves to a higher level of accountability. There are some people out there who have credit card numbers from 15 different people, and those 15 different people would be like, oh, I forgot you had that. because nothing negative ever happens to their card as a result of working with the individuals that they work with. There are people out there who are like that. Going out there and expecting that you're always going to find the bad people, yeah, that's not the way to live. What that shows is that you're a milk drinker and there's a lot about God you don't understand. You see, when God gave us this world, he said, have dominion, go do it, go have fun with it. I'm here to walk with you. That's what he said. Coming out of ignorance in that area changes the way things happen, the way they unfold. I'm going to tell on my own self because I had a situation I had to deal with yesterday. And in this situation, I had to create a budget. And one of the things that I found out is that we have been shooting the what we had in our heads as to what we actually needed to make a project work. We were way too low on. Whose fault was that? I'm going to tell you whose fault it was. It was ours because we never stopped to write down the numbers. It wasn't, this one was on our shoulders. And let me explain why. I knew better. My boss knew better. The other people around us, we all knew better. We knew we were shorting ourselves, or we knew we hadn't sat down and done the due diligence to find out what we needed to get where it was we were trying to go with this program. We all are guilty of this. If we would stop and take the time to open our eyes in the beginning, there are certain benefits that would come as a result of that. Number one, we wouldn't feel fear. We would know how to charge in our business. We would know how to address issues with our family. We would understand that we're dealing with people who feel. We would understand that there's damage even to people within our family, and we would be willing to look at that damage and then say, okay, I need to go about dealing with this a little bit differently. And that's what we would do. And everybody would win in that situation. But that's not how we often handle things. Number two, we can bring people together on the same page when they understand what it is that's clearly expected of them. When they have things written out for them, when they get what they need to do their job and to do their job adequately and accurately and in the best possible way. There are always benefits that come from not living in ignorance. And number three, we get to see God show up and show out because we know where we're going and we get to see him send his angels and clear this pathway that we just barrel down with just the most diligent of focus. But we stop ourselves from experiencing that joy, that excitement. So how do you overcome this? Read your Bible. Start with the New Living Translation. Read it like you're reading a storybook. Don't sit down to study it. Sit down to read it. Just like you would a John Grisham novel, cover to cover. And believe me, outside of numbers, I hate numbers. That's the hardest chapter in the world. That and Proverbs are my two least favorite. You know why? Because Proverbs, I'm telling y'all, Proverbs is 100% designed for men. This little burst of information, Proverbs 1 through 10, got you. I'm perfectly on board with those. Even from, I think it's 29 to 31, where they go back into the narrative. I follow that well, but these little bursts of information, I'm like, well, that is random. What does that mean? And I find myself having to chew on these things for a couple of weeks before it finally settles in. I'm like, what is he talking about here? And I will go to him and say, Papa, what are you talking about here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. What do you mean the raccoon ate the thing and as a result, everybody was jolly? Like, I don't get it. I'm just kidding. That's not in the Bible. Anyway, so here's the thing. When you start reading your Bible, it first lays a foundation for you to understand what God really set out for all of us to have. And then when you go through and you start elevating into new levels of Bibles, like there's three that I would recommend personally: the New Living Translation, the King James versions, and then of course I would go into the interlinear. Hebrew, and Greek. This is not a short-term thing. The New Living Translation is. And truth be told, you can read the Bible New Living Translation. It's not boring in the same amount of time it would take you to read a John Grisham novel, Clancy, whomever's King, whomever it is you love. Start there. Next, start educating yourself. If money is an issue for you, find lesser expensive programs that will teach you how to do something, how to go from point A to point B, how to maneuver and how to go through. And most of the time, those will be automated. So they'll be evergreen courses. You get to watch them at your leisure. And if you feel like watching them on a Friday night, if you feel like pounding them out over a weekend, do that. But absorb them. Whatever level you can absorb them, absorb them. And learn everything you can learn. Because what's going to happen is understanding is like a puzzle, right? And you have to find the pieces that need to go in. And when you begin to look at life more as you're playing a game, whether it's Clue, Monopoly, Sorry, any of the games, or Risk, any of those games, and you come up with success in, or the board game Life. You know what? Life and Clue are the best ones to represent this, because with Clue, you have to go through and figure out who did it, with what weapon, and in what room. And the strategy that you incorporate to do that really determines how quickly and who wins the game. If you randomly go into every room that's not in your hand and ask for things that you don't have and you only get one, it's very easy to come up with the wrong person, room, or weapon at any point in time. And that's how we end up with faulty information. We put together the wrong clues. But when you go out and you start educating yourself really with how this stuff works, what ends up happening is this. You start learning how to put the pieces together. Now, instead of having a situation where it blows up or it doesn't work or you're left in a rough spot, you've got a cohesive plan that allows you to move forward. Let God build your kingdom. Understand and don't begrudge the little itty bitty steps that He puts you on so that you can get to that next level. Don't be afraid. Enjoy the journey. If you will allow yourself, and here's your last how, to laugh and have fun at the challenges that you have and put them together like pieces of a puzzle, you will have the greatest experience on this planet. You will have more things than you could ever possibly dream of. And you'll be able to laugh about them the whole way there. There'll always be a really great story attached to how it came about. I'll see you next week.